I would want to welcome you here for our GWP annual lecture 2014. You will give to us a presentation on water and climate, global to local Caribbean socio-economic climate change scenarios. Before you will be doing that, I would just want to say a few words about your professional career. Professor Agard is a professor of tropical island ecology and the head of the Department of Life Sciences at the University of the West Indies. He was chairman of the Environmental Management Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and he has been serving internationally as lead author in the fourth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. Together with Professor Pachauri and others at that time, he received the Nobel Prize, and he's now again in this assignment for the fifth assessment of the IPCC. Professor Agard is very much involved in international climate change related activities, be it with the Inter-American Development Bank or with CARICOM. I don't want to bring this up all here in detail, but what I would like to mention, as this is also very much of an interest for us, as we have as one of our thematic focus areas in the new strategy, the ecosystems and water security. Professor Agard has been undertaking research for ecosystem project services and also looking into the Nariva swamp restoration and carbon sequestration as an example. So I think these are all things we are very much interested in, and we are really happy that you're here with us and share your rich experience with us in the area of climate and water. So the floor is now yours, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Yes, thank you very much, Chair, for the very warm welcome to the members of the steering committee and the organizers. And thank you for the honor of being allowed to share a few thoughts with you. I was a bit challenged that I'm among experts on water, and I'm not one of the experts on water. So I don't want to insult you by telling you what you already know. I was very stimulated by the conversation at the head table last night at dinner, because I realized that the context was a lot wider than I had expected. I heard talk about ecosystem services and a wide range of things, politics, sociology, that water was in a wider context. And that was quite a delight for me, because the gist of what I wanted to tell you today in the short time that I have available is really to take a wider context, an integrated view. And that essentially, again, as I sat in the back listening to the summaries, isn't actually the perspective that I got. That with regard to water, an integrated view and a wider perspective is being taken. So that's just a perfect introduction, your summaries that I heard. So I think this diagram is a useful starting point of the larger context. There are issues of the sectors, the social aspects, the economic aspects, the environmental aspects, themes that keep coming up everywhere of resilience, sustainability in particular, equity, the issue of the scales of, I heard that mentioned just a little while ago, about the need to be relevant to people at local scale, and issues of downscaling to what is relevant to people. So the issues of the global, the regional, and the local are all of the things that we have to intertwine as we come up with policy, legislation, strategy, perspectives to actually make the environment the one that we think is best for supporting people, and not only people, but ecosystems, because I heard that perspective as well. There's water for people, there's water for ecosystems, water for industry, there's a wide range of uses, and all of that has to be taken into consideration. So I'm just going to give you the first two slides to remind you of why this is important, but I'm preaching to the converted. That is, when we look at the graphs that you've seen, every primary school child knows now that the carbon dioxide concentration varies on a natural cycle. It has gone up and down before. Our problem is that in our time frame, it's gone beyond the level that it has been for more than 150,000 years. And this is not accurate, actually. The current level is a bit high. We've reached just past 400 parts per million. And our problem is this. If this level that we're at now, which is about here, if we keep going the way we're going, we are already in unprecedented territory. This is happening too fast. Okay? By 2100, if we don't do something, we're going to be right up here. 700 parts per million plus. And we don't know what will happen. That's the truth. Okay? Consequences. So that's just to give you a little bit of perspective. 2 to 4.5 degrees centigrade, possibly even 6 degrees centigrade is what we're looking at if we don't do something. So in the fifth assessment of the IPCC, is a new set of scenarios. You would have all heard about the old special report on emission scenarios, A1 and B1 and so forth. But there's a new set of scenarios using the latest emission data. And they're referred to as the representative concentration pathways, or RCPs. So you'll keep hearing now about RCPs and less about SRES and A1 and B1. Those old scenarios were based on data that is now more than a decade old. And in fact, the projections at the time when they were done, the world population is 1 billion people more than was projected in those scenarios. Okay? So using the latest emissions data, this is purely based on the physics. Here is a range of possibilities. So representative concentration pathways doesn't say anything about the socioeconomics or the politics of how we get there. It's simple physics that if you have a certain amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, they have a warming potential, and the RCPs, the radiative forcing, is in watts per meter squared. Okay? So in the lighter part of the diagram is what has happened so far. You'll see the graph is going up, the warming. What happens next? We can't predict the future. These are projections. So the global climate community, there are 42 global climate models that have been run in different parts of the world. And what I have put on this diagram is the median of all of the climate models. I'm going to show you just now. I'm going to put them all on the... So this is a range of projections. So we are here now, right here, actual data, no argument. You will see it's going up. My belief is if we don't do something, we're going to keep going up on this part here. 8.5 watts per meter squared. This is called RCP 8.5. That will happen if by the year 2100 we reach the 1,350 parts per million of carbon dioxide equivalents. We are at 400 parts per million now. You can go on the web any day and you can see exactly what it is on any particular day. All of these reporting stations actually download to a website, and you could see the graph being plotted in real time. Okay? So it's about 400 parts per million. We've just crossed 400 parts per million. So the next one, the mean of the next set of models, 6.0 watts per meter squared, or RCP 6.0, is what will happen if we reach the 850 parts per million, and that's by the year 2100. Okay? And then the next one is 4.5 watts per meter squared, which we will get to if we hit 650 parts per million. And the last one, 2.6 watts per meter squared, is if we reach 450 parts per million. Now we are at 400 parts per million now. Okay? And the Kyoto Protocol is going to expire next year, 2015. And we've had lots of global meetings to come up with a successor agreement. Copenhagen, Cancun, Poland, and we have no successor agreement. Okay? None. Nothing that's binding, in fact. So now I think it's too late for RCP 2.6. Not going to happen. This is what the small island developing states have argued for, that the consequences of a global increase in mean temperature of more than 1.5 degrees centigrade will be so devastating for the small island developing states that they are demanding that whatever agreement is arrived at is an agreement that will keep the mean global surface temperature increase to no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade. Not going to happen. Too late. Okay? That is that last scenario. You will see that if we came to an agreement and we stabilized now, then over the rest of the century, things will stabilize and go down a bit. That is why this RCP 2.6 is an optimistic scenario. But it's not going to happen. We could eliminate that from the graph. It's too late. Okay? So the best we could hope for is somewhere in the range of the 4.5 to the 8.5 watts per meter squared. If we have a global agreement and it's not rigidly enforced, we might end up somewhere in between, but we can't predict. This will mean a global mean surface temperature increase of about 2 degrees centigrade at best, okay, if we come to an agreement and we enforce it. And if we don't come to any agreement or we don't enforce anything, 4, 5, 6 degrees centigrade increase in temperature by 2100 is what we're talking about. Okay? So that's where we are. There's no emotion in this. This is just purely physics. Watts per meter squared, gases have a warming potential. Doesn't tell us anything about the politics and the socioeconomics of how we got there. This is what will happen if the concentration reaches to these levels. Okay? So agrees the global modeling community. So in IPCC, that would be working group 1. I am in working group 2. So I'm going to structure my talk from the global to the local, because anytime I speak to ministers or speak in different parts of the world, all the ministers say, stop. Not interested in models, What does this mean for people? What is it going to cost? What are the options? So scientists like models. I heard a lot of mention about models and downscaling and sophisticated models and stuff like that. I like models, but ministers don't like models. I literally was speaking to one and he put his hand up. He said, stop. Okay. That's the Minister of Finance. He said, stop. What does this mean for people? What is it going to cost? So we have to convert all of this into their language. What does it mean for people down on the ground? And what is it going to cost? What are the options? So I'm going to get down to the regional level and then I'm going to get down to the local level. So the regional level, if we use the same 42 global models, here is what will happen in the region, the Caribbean region, because I'm going to use it as an example. Now in IPCC, I've done these diagrams for different parts of the world, but I don't have time today to look at some places. If you look at precipitation, for example, since we want to emphasize water, some places, there will be more rainfall. Where you have monsoons, boy, you're in for a trip. If you think you've seen water, higher temperatures, water goes up, it's got to come down someplace. In the Caribbean, however, the trend is we'll be having less rainfall overall. Okay? You will see from the models, just if we take out the Caribbean part, RCP 2.6, 4.5, 6.0, and 8.5. Just look at the side here, you'll see the mean and the error bars. Okay? So the red one at the end is RCP 8.5. That's where I think we are on at the moment if we don't do anything. And the zero, of course, this is the percent increase in precipitation. You'll see this is 50%, that's 100% decrease. So the trend is a decrease in rainfall. Okay, in the region. The Caribbean, I think, and the Mediterranean are the unlucky ones. Other regions are going to have increased rainfall, but, well, small island developing state regions. But in the Caribbean, we're going to have less rainfall. The implications for water availability, for people, for agriculture, for everything. Okay? And, of course, the temperature is a no-brainer. Temperature is going up within that range, but I'm not going to emphasize that. So, local level, just to take Trinidad and Tobago, since we happen to be in Trinidad and Tobago, here are the graphs, precipitation change in Trinidad and Tobago. This is the mean from January to December with respect to 1985 to 2005, and this is using the fifth assessment, CMIP5 subset data from the whole planet. So the 42 GCMs have been run. The planet is covered with a grid, depending on the model, might be now down to 100 to 150 kilometers squared. In a box of that size an island is a little speck with a lot of water around it. So hence, what I heard earlier when I was listening at the back about downscaling to relevant level is an appropriate question. People are not interested in global. They think, oh, you know, what does this mean for me? So at the local level, the trend in Trinidad is you'll see with RCP 8.5 in particular, you'll see the decrease in rainfall might be as much as minus 25% by the year 2100. But Trinidad has a lot of water. It's not really an island. It's a disconnected portion of mainland America. Okay? But what about Barbados? Adrian Cashman is here. Lives in Barbados. Barbados has some issues with regard to the availability of water as it is at the moment, some serious issues. Precipitation change in Barbados, average January to December with respect to 1985 to 2005. And you will see the projections for Barbados. If you look at the average of the 42 global models, you will see all the means are going below the zero. Okay? Decrease precipitation. All right? Now, major implications. So Adrian, you know, you have work to do, I think. Hard work, good luck. So we have to, as the ministers tell me, you know, stop. Oh, this is lovely models and stuff, 42 models, GCMs. Get down to ground level. Okay? Here's another one, St. Lucia, same sort of trend, because we have work going on through the Caribbean. Decrease, but to different extents. Okay? Now, one thing I want to point out to you is something else that many people may not have noticed, because they're looking at the trend. If you look at the peaks, okay, and look at the peaks historically, you would have seen where there is, you know, heavy precipitation. If I go to Barbados, you look and you notice that these peaks go higher than they have gone historically. If you look at how high these are, those are extreme events. That's what the models are saying. Although you have less water overall, when you do get some rainfall, you will get a lot of rainfall in a very short period of time, extreme events. Now, in the Caribbean, those from St. Lucia would say that that has happened quite recently, the last few months. They've never seen anything like it. Sheets of water coming down in hours. And the smaller islands, in St. Lucia, for example, just about everything was washed away. It was an incredible amount of water. Okay? Not raindrops, sheets of water. Okay? They're still trying to recover. Complete devastation. If you live on an island, you can't, evacuate another state. There are no federal resources to be brought in. You're on an island, So the consequences are quite grave. So increase in extreme events. If you look, so that's Barbados. If you look at St. Lucia, you will see some extremes also that are outside of the normal range as well. So that's double bad news. That's less precipitation and increase in extreme events. That's a global trend. There's another IPCC report that shows statistically that is what is happening globally. Okay? All right, so to answer the minister's question, stop. So what? What does that mean? Well, climate change, there's a temperature increase, there's a precipitation change, there's storms, there's sea level rise, and so forth. And it may have impacts on health, agriculture, and forest, and watershed management, and coastal areas, and species and natural areas. And I'm sure you have noticed that all of these things involve water. Right? All. Water is everywhere. It's in everything. It's an key aspect of everything that's going to unfold. Health. So insect vectors. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you have less water, you store more water in containers, you breed more mosquitoes. If you have more rainfall, you have puddles of water everywhere, you breed more mosquitoes. Dengue spreads. Now we have some other, I can't even pronounce the name of what is it called? Yes. But insect vectors, breeding in water, the spread of disease are one of the major things. So I will mention later on, we have a project going on in that. Agriculture, less water. Water is critical for agriculture, so it decreases yields. Forests, we have work going on forests as well, but of course, drying out will cause shifts in forests. Watershed management, supply of water to people, so water scarcity. Coastal areas, again, involving water. Sea level rise plus flooding, low-lying areas, flooding on land, and so forth. Wetlands. So water is involved in every aspect of the major impacts that we are projecting will unfold. Okay? So it's not just about water availability to people, and I'm glad that that perspective is already here. Preach it to the converted. So, as I say, water availability is a part of every aspect of the direct impact of climate change. Problem that we have, though, is that the physical impact is just one part of the problem. The potential impact of climate change has two main components. One is the physical climate signal. I'm just going to choose out one, which is the rainfall intensity, the no-brainer. Yeah? But the other is the difficult part, the part of which I have 0% understanding. The socioeconomics and the political part. I heard some chatter about that here. Okay? We know a lot about the science, but that's the easy part. Politics has no rules, I am afraid. The rules change on a daily basis. And this is very distressing. So the impact of the physical signal has two components. And let me give you a parallel example using earthquakes, because earthquakes can be accurately measured on the Richter scale. In the Caribbean, a few years ago, there was a 7.0 Richter, 7.0 on the Richter scale earthquake. Haiti was devastated, leveled. The reason it was leveled was because there was no enforcement of building codes and so forth. Okay? The same year, 3 or 4 months later, there was an earthquake of the same magnitude in Chile. And the results are completely different because in Chile, they're highly organized, they enforce the building code, so the impact was different. So the magnitude of the physical signal does not only determine what the impact is. There's another component, and we have to take that into consideration. If you don't do anything, you'll get the full outcome of the physical signal. But you can adapt. There are things you can do, and that will reduce the risk. Okay? So that's part of the message. How do we address that? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a complex framework to look at the scenarios. So if we look on the y-axis, here is the climate signal. I'm proposing to scale this according to the RCPs. Of course, RCP 8.5 would be the strongest climate signal. As the climate signal goes up, the mitigation challenge is in the opposite direction. Okay? So the mitigation challenge is highest with the highest climate signal. And the adaptation channel, of course, is the similar. If the adaptation challenge is the highest at the highest climate signal. So you see why the arrows are pointing that way. And we said there's another component. So along the x-axis is our socioeconomics and politics, our quasi axis. Okay? Because we have a number of permutations of those two things. One might presume, as many people do, that if you have high socioeconomic development, like high HDI perhaps, I don't know how you measure this exactly. If you have high socioeconomic, you should have more resources available and you should be better organized to make a response, to adapt, to make plans. And if you have little resources and life is about survival, I use an example like Haiti, for example, then you don't put the things that are required in place, and the impact is going to be greater. So if we wanted to look at scenarios, possibilities, the permutations, we should choose examples of each to show the politicians what might happen if you don't do anything, how much worse it will be compared to if you put some plans in place now. The cost of doing that will be a far smaller percentage of GDP than if you waited later on for things to happen and you're reactive. Okay? So here's our permutation. This is a framework within which we're developing our scenarios in the region. And we're going to then bring this down to local level by getting some local examples. So what might happen to make it real. So I hope that framework is clear. And broken down into, part of your plan might be mitigation, some portion of adaptation, and whatever you don't deal with is residual. The residual in Haiti, for example, might be quite high because there are few plants, for example, by comparison. Unless they're provided with the support to do that. That is why they'll need help and assistance. Okay, so in our scenarios, in the Caribbean, the typology is that there are agriculturally based economies, like Haiti. Most of the economies are tourism-based economies. Tourists, like when they go on an expensive holiday, they expect to have as much water as they require. And in a nice hotel like this, you turn the shower on, you don't expect to pay a lot of money and have restrictions as to water availability. So tourist economies have huge water demands, okay? An industrial economy like Trinidad is amazing. We have the largest desalination plant in the Western Hemisphere in Trinidad. I'm sure you didn't know that. And the desalinated water was produced to go to industry to cool equipment, not for people. In order to assure industry that they will have guaranteed 24-day, 365 days a year water supply, instead of fixing the leaking pipes, the government built the largest desalination plant in the Western Hemisphere right in the Point Lisas industrial estate, so there'll be no loss of by transmission, and they can only do that, use an expensive solution, because we are an oil exporting country. One of only 2 small island developing states in the world that are net exporters of energy. It's only Trinidad and Tobago and Bahrain. Energy is cheap. Gasoline is the 3rd cheapest in the world. Electricity is cheap. Okay? So we could use an expensive solution like desalination. Doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm not a politician. Okay? But make more sense to me to fix the leaking pipes. And since you have an abundance of surface water, I think it would be a no-brainer, but I'm wrong. Okay, now, so in developing scenarios, we're going to take a bit of a broader look from the global level. And at the global level, here's my diagram. This is what is in my head. At the global level, there are a set of global scenarios, shared socioeconomic policy assumptions. So out of the IPCC process, there are some global scenarios. There's now a whole volume of a journal that describes the shared socioeconomic assumption scenarios. At the regional level and at the local level, people in small islands generally thought they can't influence anything at the global level, but they're wrong. From the global level, there's a feed down of commodity prices. For example, like the price of oil and gas is something Trinidad and Tobago is quite interested in. Agricultural products, what you can sell you're producing banana, sugar, whatever it is, whatever the global commodity price is. You don't fix those, you sell. So there is a link between the global and the regional, price of oil and gas, all of those things. And then there's a regional perspective in scenarios, whether small islands should stick together, federate, whether they should each try to diversify in some little niche area and so forth. So we'll have a scenario exercise to look at possible futures. And then down at the local level is what people are actually interested in. How is this going to affect me? All of that is, what eggheads and universities talk about, scenarios and stuff like that. Haven't reached down to people yet. So we're going to use all of that to develop some actual examples of how that might play out in an industrial economy like Trinidad and Tobago, tourist-based economy like Barbados and St. Lucia, an agricultural economy and mineral economy like Jamaica and so forth. So just want to give you a little bit of a perspective as to what many people in the region think about what is the kind of economies we have in the region. The economies, and I'm going to take it within the context of sustainable development, a la Brundtland. 3 pillars: economy, society, environment. So says Brundtland. But in this part of the world, we think that the economy has 2 parts. Okay? An onshore part, an onshore economy, and an offshore economy. And traditionally, long ago, there used to be a plantation. Foreign landowners. They said, we'll provide the ideas. What we need from you is the labor. Slavery, indentureship. We need land. You produce commodities. You export that back. The old-fashioned plantation is now replaced by, we produce oil and gas. We make, we're the world's largest exporter of ammonia in Trinidad and Tobago, urea, methanol, the 5th largest exporter of liquefied natural gas. We get foreign exchange for that, but it's about what they want, not what we want. It's about export and GDP. Okay, our accounting is in terms of GDP. So in this sort of economy, old-fashioned plantation economy, what you need from society is essentially labor and institutions, and the onshore economy produces goods and services. And the environment is a provider of, I would like to term it ecosystem services, which go into industry. But we take things like water, like, underprice. It's an input to industry, okay? And in return, of course, there are impacts like pollution and so forth. And the environment also provides ecosystem services to people, to society. Like water is a key one, okay? So water is quite key to industry and also to the needs of people. And in return, society, there are impacts, water pollution and so forth. You know all of that. So this is the model. Traditionally, the environmental part is the part that was not included. The environment was thought of as a source of free services, okay? Inexhaustible free services. So it's all about the economy and the needs of people. Between those two, the environment can absorb any amount of anything, and you could use any amount of anything from it. Nothing will happen. That was a traditional view. Incorrect view, with major consequences that you know very well, okay? So that's the model of how things work. So in elaborating our socioeconomic scenarios, we have a number of projects. One, and Adrian is sitting there, so you can attack him afterwards. Adrian is leading work on water and climate change. There are 2 projects. One is the Global Local Caribbean Climate Change Adaptation and scenarios. We have funding from the European Union, and we have funding from IDRC, so Adrian is leading a project on water and climate change throughout the Caribbean as well. Now, in the case of Barbados, so we're going to use Barbados as an example. Adrian is developing some models. So I'm not going to bore you with talk about WEEP and all kinds of other, egg-headed, jargony models. And we also working with Stockholm Environmental Institute in one of the projects. Barbados is the 15th most water-scarce country in terms of available renewable water resources per person in the world, and has a total annual water demand equivalent to 98% of the estimated annual available renewable resources. Okay, 98%. So what happens if you have less water available with climate change? Good luck, Adrian. Okay, so to get this across to the decision makers and to what they need to do now before this unfolds is a big problem. It sounds easy to us, but I'm told by politicians that unless you're a politician, you won't understand what it is like. They only speak to each other because there are demands from health and education, and you don't have enough resources, so you can't do everything, and everybody criticizes you. That's what I'm told. It's easy for people in universities to think it's easy, you know, to find the solutions. But this is a big one because water is fundamental to everything, every aspect of everything. So if you have less water available and you're already on the edge with regard to the availability of water, what kind of future are we looking at? Okay. We have work going on in Jamaica. We have a very bright PhD student, Dale Rankin, who's working on sweet potatoes. It's one of the major staple crops. If you look at the sweet potatoes, I was very intrigued. This one is called ganja potatoes. There's the leaves. I had to look very carefully. Apparently ganja is everywhere in Jamaica. Looking at various kinds of, so he's planted out for the last few years fields of sweet potatoes, and looking at he has a model. This is the aqua crop model from FAO, water, where we're looking at all the components. So he's actually measured those in the field, okay? Phenology, the canopy cover, the rooting depth, the rainfall, the fertilization, the solar insulation, everything, all the components are going to the yield, weight of the potatoes. Okay? Good for PhD students. It's like slave labor, actually. So he's done very good work, he has got the numbers, and then you can plot out, you know, the projections. You don't look at the details. This is just to show you, you use the actual measurements to calibrate the model. Okay? So then we can project forward to changes in rainfall, what effect it will have on the yield, essentially what we're doing. So since we know from the models, and we're downscaling 11 GCMs to 10 kilometers squared in the Caribbean. So we have a 128 core server where it's been running for more than a year now, and we downscaling to the small landmass. It can only be done in places where there's sufficient historical data and spatial coverage with rainfall and temperature stations to make it scientifically valid. So in a few countries in the Caribbean, we do have an adequate amount of data where we can downscale to 10 kilometers squared. That becomes then relevant to people where they are. And so we can then look at potential impacts on agriculture and water availability and so forth. So I'm just going to go past that. Other work that we're going on, water involved again. There was another set of funding from IDB, Economics of Climate Change Adaptation. So I was the principal investigator in this project, just finished. This will feed in as well. So we've looked at coastal flooding, storm surge, wind, rainfall, and so forth, droughts, damages, some factor times the hazard by the vulnerability. Forget the maths. You can look in different, sorry, let me just go back. Different parts of Trinidad and Tobago, desegregate it into administrative units to see where is subject to flooding, where is subject to, you know, and so forth. And all of those components, and also we're working with some economists. So the economist's job is to convert this into money. To answer the minister's question, what's this going to cost? The way that this is done is that we had a number of historical incidents, tropical storms, where there was flooding and damage, and which the economic damage was assessed. So those historical incidents can be used to calibrate wind speed and rainfall to actually recorded damage over a number of points. So we have a, for the modeling type, stochastic model simulator. We have 300,000 storm tracks through Trinidad and Tobago. in which we have used to then calibrate the models is the actual damage. Okay? So then, in the future, with that calibration, we can project what the cost will be. So, I'm just going to go past this. And then we come up with a list of a lot of work went into coming up with possible adaptation measures with the possible cost, and then working out the benefit to cost ratio. So I don't know if you can barely make that out, but I'll just point out, I put this in here because of the discussion at the head table last night. I said, we had some work in which, if you look at I don't know if you can make out the last column. This one is, what's that? National Building Code. The benefit to cost ratio is 15.9. Construction of dikes in coastal areas, benefit to cost ratio is 0.1. Meteorological alert system connected to the monitoring system, 101.9 is the benefit to cost ratio. Social awareness program, 0.5. Institutional training program, 2.3. Rainwater harvesting, 0.7. Infrastructure and building refurbishment, 0.5. Retention ponds, 0.2. Filter strips, 0.7. I can't make that out. Something with pavements. Beach nourishment, 0.9. Mangrove planting, 95.9. That's the one I was looking for. My colleague from Bangalore said he knew that already. One of the biggest benefit to cost ratios is actually planting mangroves. As opposed to building dikes, okay, where there is little benefit to the cost. Planting mangroves is the biggest small investment and big returns sustainably. And we always thought so. To see it come out in an objective analysis by economists who are not tree huggers or emotional about these things, this is just the way it came out. Really confirms something that we knew already and which I heard coming from this audience before, of the importance of the relationship between water and ecosystems. So the mangroves are already providing a service which is not obvious until they're removed, and places start to flood, and coast starts to erode, and so forth. And so you would be better off leaving them where they are in the first place. And if you have removed them, you would be better off planting them back rather than building a seawall, okay, putting in concrete. That's what the economics says, okay? It's a whole set of professors of economics. The one who led this team was from Spain, in fact, actually. No emotional attachment. This is just how it worked out, all right? So it's useful to be able to show the decision makers. We're not being hysterical, okay? This is what makes sense. This is what makes sense. And the economics of if you have limited resources to invest, these are the best investments. Okay, I don't have time to go into, there's other work going on human health modeling. This is led by Professor Chedi. He's doing work in a number of projects, 3 projects. I think he's been doing work for quite a while. He has a grant from the Bill and Linda Gates Foundation. So climate change, and he's in working group, in the health chapter of working group 2 of IPCC. So he's in my department. And they're working on the spread of insect vectors and the transmission of diseases. Mosquitoes are amazing. They seem to benefit, as I point out, no matter what you do. Lots of people, not enough water, they store water in tanks. They provide abundant habitat for mosquitoes to breed. You have downpours of rain, puddles of water everywhere, helps mosquitoes to breed as well. So increased temperature, the mosquito breeding life cycle are shortened, so they go through more cycles because temperature increases, the rate of growth, as you learned in primary school. So they get to adulthood faster, they reproduce. They're a little smaller from growing faster, but they're able to reproduce, and so there are more cycles of mosquito in the season. Now, with places warming up, tropical diseases are spreading to places where they never occurred before. There's malaria in France, there are cases of malaria even in Scotland, for example. Amazing, okay? we have work going on, this is Dr. Shobha Maraj. She had started her work in Oxford and is working on project with Adrian and on water and climate change, and also on another ecosystem services project. So water affects forests. Drying out means that forests are going to shift, and all of the resources and the ecosystem services you expect from forests are also going to change as well. So here are some output for some of the modeling that has been done and a paper that has been published, but no time to go into that. Just giving you a broad sweep of how water is everywhere. Changes in the availability of water affect not only people, but ecosystems and the delivery of services from those ecosystems back to people. Multitude of effects. So, how you put all of this together? You know, goodness. Science is great, you know, living and doing a great period. Write a lot of papers so that when humans get replaced by insects, when we kill ourselves out or something, you know, the dinosaurs were magnificent. If we mess up, maybe we leave something written behind so they'll know what we did, how we messed up. So how do we pull all of this together to look at adaptation and disaster risk management? Because that is really what we're facing. And in the case of climate change is an additive to all of the other issues you already have with water. No, it's not all about climate change. This is just, you know, another thing on top of all of the issues, the pollution, the wastage of water, the destruction of watersheds, the whole works. This is just, and poor people are the ones who are most affected. If you have money, I guess for the time being you could buy water in a bottle, and maybe as we all become accustomed to getting water in bottles, you might forget that water doesn't come from bottles, okay? You know, many people think, oh, the water, they think, you open a bottle of water. But poor people depend on getting water, in many cases, more directly from wells and rivers and so forth. They are the first to be affected. They can't buy water, okay? So all of that has to be put together. Now, I'm going to get maybe a little politically incorrect, but in the last month I have had meetings with 3 ministers in Trinidad and Tobago, just to get down to very local level, okay? Because as I said, all this global and regional stuff doesn't really strike them to get down. So in the papers in Trinidad and Tobago, all the papers had an article about the Social Progress Index was released at the School World Forum on Social Entrepreneurship. And Trinidad and Tobago was rated as the 47th most socially advanced country in the world. However, if you look carefully down